Hey Tim, look at this.
Needs work.
Hey Tim, how about this?
Still needs work.
Darn it. How about this?
Nice, high five.
Hey there everybody, how's it going?
My name's Tim.
And my name's Michael.
And you're watching the TMI show.
That's the Tim and Michael Information Show.
And we are wrapping up the CTN episode with part two. Two. That's the J.J. Abrams effect. Just pretends those are lens flares.
JJ, I am the next Spielberg Abrams.
Well, he's pretty much touching everything that Spielberg and Lucas ever did with Star Wars.
I love his stuff.
Yeah,
I love his stuff. I really do. So what we were talking about in the last episode was Tim's experience at CTN Animation Expo, and what we wanted to springboard into this episode was networking.
Right.
Now, one of the ways that you can go about networking, Tim, you were telling me a little statistic about online jobs and percentages and.
So let's look at the way the career hunt goes for most people. The easiest way to look for a job, is to look for it online.
Mm-hmm.
Consequently, only about 20% of all job openings are posted online. And interestingly, roughly 80% of all job hunters are looking exclusively online for those jobs.
That's a really sad statistic
really
when you
is.
think about that. But I mean, it's true.
Yeah.
And the same thing in theater, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Actually, 80% of the jobs that are available are tech jobs, and 80% of the people that are trying to get them are actors or non-tech, you know? Like, okay. So we were talking about expos, and the greatest thing is, meeting people, actually getting in front of people. And I can't think of a better way that you have a concentrated group of the people that you want to network with. And first of all, we want to talk about the portfolio and introduce this because we're going to be talking about it a lot.
I toted this around with me all weekend and showed it to a few people. I didn't want to force it on people. You never want to do that because then you come off as kind of self-serving.
So, no, hold it up. Keep it up. Keep it up for a second because we're going to be talking about this, guys. When we talk about your portfolio is the representation of you, your work, your skill, and your personality. It's much more than just what you can draw. I mean, I remember flipping through, and then I actually saw that you had drawn like a sonic screwdriver.
Oh yeah.
So I'm like, oh, this guy's a Whovian, you know. And he's, you know, even in that first one that you did, Cars Land, I'm like, okay, then you're into Pixar. You know,
and
Disney, you know, I mean, it says a lot about that, and you know, this is a great little story, and so already I'm getting a lot of this from Tim's portfolio. So your portfolio is crucial, and having a good portfolio is crucial, but that's another episode. So what we wanted to talk to you guys about is how you can go about networking at these places, and we have a couple points of our do's and our don'ts that we want to talk about.
Absolutely.
First point I wanted to make is I was just at Patrick Ballesteros' Artist in Residence last night. What an awesome guy. And I would love to get him here on the show.
Oh, yeah.
If we ever could.
If he's watching, he'll email us.
Hey! It was a great little seminar, and I bought some of his artwork, and I was just soaking stuff in. But he talks about how at a convention, now these portfolios, a lot of people are carrying them around, and everybody wants to see.
In fact, by the way, if you're not at a convention like CTN if you're not there with a portfolio, you're conventioning wrong.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Just saying.
And maybe, you know, like I went to Anime Expo just because I wanted to get experience to anime, not because I wanted to network necessarily. But then the next year I was like, oh, there's like voice acting workshop and like all this sorts of stuff. But then I was aware of it. So a place like CTN is definitely a place that you want to network, and maybe you just want to meet people, and that's okay. But if you're somebody who wants to work in the industry and you're trying to meet these people, like Tim says, if you don't have your portfolio with you, well, you might want to rethink that. So, but a lot of these people, you have to keep in mind, hundreds, if not thousands of portfolios are coming their way daily. And now multiply that by 3 because it's a 3-day expo, or any expo. Maybe it's a 4-day expo, WonderCon or Comic-Con, or you know. So you got to be prepared. So you don't want to rush people. That's one of my first rules. Cool. You don't want to be the people because, you know, to just kind of crowd around and then they're just going to get bombarded. They're not going to remember you. So,
and by the way, we'll talk about, when I get to my points, we'll talk about how to kind of a friendly way to get people to look at your portfolio, but I'll let Michael.
Oh yeah, just so don't rush people. The other one I wanted to say is just have a conversation. There's nothing better than just meeting a person, you know? I mean, you can show me your work, but if we're just meeting as people, that's another thing. If we have some sort of genuine connection. And the other thing that I wanted to lastly put is let them come to you. I know I get super nervous when I'm starstruck, you know? I'm just like, oh my gosh, they're right there. Especially if it's an artist that I look up to, an artist that's influenced me. And who knows, they're standing right here, you know, in front of me. Especially when you think about a lot of the artists in past history that you wish you could meet, you know? But, you know, my DeLorean my DeLorean isn't working, so I can't go back and meet them. And also, you know, disrupt the space-time continuum, Marty! That was a horrible Christopher Lloyd. I can do so much better. But anyways.
That's really heavy, that.
Thank you.
Yeah, well.
Marty.
Does she have the hair for it?
Well, maybe I will.
Yeah,
one day. So, let them come to you. You know, you can push all you want, but sometimes if they're the one who's interested to actually see, you know, so don't rush people. Have a conversation. Let them come to you. You were talking to me about your experience, and you were actually touching on a lot of these things. Go ahead and tell me about how you go about this.
Well, and I mean, the first thing I'm going to say is kind of the flip side of what you just said, because the great thing about CTN is there's a lot of people, both students and professionals alike, of all levels, who are displaying and selling their artwork. And so you can actually go to them. I mean, they're sitting there, and you can just go right up and talk to them and have that conversation Michael was talking about. I mean, and there's nothing wrong with approaching people. You don't want to bum rush them, which is what I think Michael is trying to get on. Sometimes people aren't going to come to you, and you know, if you can graciously and courteously approach them, then that's okay.
And don't worry about that. That's a quick point that I'm going to interject there. You may not get to meet everybody that you want to meet, especially if they're in a huge line, if they're just being bombarded, and you may not always have the best first impression. Sometimes they just have to go, they have to eat, or whatever it is. Don't be discouraged by that, guys. You know, you just have to say okay and then move on. You may not get to do everything at an expo. You may not get to meet everybody. You may meet somebody, and they may not even get to look at your portfolio. How many people looked at your portfolio?
Only a handful.
But of those handful, would you say that you kind of wanted to show them, or did they ask you about it?
It was exclusively people that that asked to see it.
But, doesn't that feel so much better when that happens, though? Because then you're like, oh, wow, they asked me. Yes, here it is.
And again, we'll get to that point on how you get them to look at the portfolio, or get them to look at your portfolio. So real fast, bringing it back in, my kind of 3 points for networking are: get good at small talk. Like you said, find a connection, and I'll talk about my experience with that, connecting with a few people. And third point is ask them a lot of questions, and you know, you'll find out why when we get to there.
Please expound.
Yes. Well, getting back to small talk, again, you're going to see a lot of people sitting down at tables, and you want to get to a point where you have a connection with them over something, a specific connection. So you've kind of got to keep the conversation going until you get to that point, if you ever do. Sometimes you won't, and that's okay. But you want to talk to as many people as you can, trying to get to that connection. So the way to get there is just having a lot of questions you can kind of pull out of your head at a moment's notice. Hey, you know, you've got a lot of great art. What was your inspiration behind this? What's the story behind this? Where did you go to school? Where do you work now? Are you trying to get to work? And I mean, I've done this for a year, and I can kind of pull out rapid-fire questions out of my hat and keep the conversation flowing with people on a regular basis. So that's point number one. You want to get good at small talk and keep the conversation going for a couple minutes so you can hopefully find a point where you get to a connection. And this is a specific connection, by the way. Obviously, everybody at Animation Expo has some kind of connection because they all love art. But you want to find a deeper connection over something people really love. General instance of this is the people who put Doctor Who fan art out at their booths. Really smart move, because that guaranteed I was going to go talk to them and we'd chat about Doctor Who for a bit. The more valuable connections I had, though, were when people looked through my work or looked at my business card and said, oh, wow, that's the Nautilus, that's a submarine, that's really cool. And I'm like, oh yeah, I really like submarines. And I would talk about, you know, how much I love Jules Verne or 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. And suddenly we've got a deeper thing to bond over, deeper subject matter to bond over. And usually the people who I had that conversation with were people I'm staying in touch with now. So that's why you want to find those connections, because that will lead to a longer term relationship than just the in-the-moment conversation. And the third point I have is keep asking them questions, because again, you're probably in this enigma place of, I want to show them my work, but I don't want to push it on them, so how do I get them to see it unless they're generous enough to ask for it? Well, you can kind of shimmy them to that point. I found that a lot of people, if I small talked with them, small talk, is that even a proper verb?
It is now.
We'll work with it, yes. If I engage in small talk with them long enough and ask them enough questions about them, after a few minutes, they're kind of, timer would go off and we're all hardwired, or those of us, who are courteously minded, which I think is most of us, are hardwired to think, gosh, I am talking about myself a lot. I should ask this person about themselves. And so after I asked somebody enough questions about themselves, they would turn the conversation around to me and say, so what do you do? What kind of work do you do? What do you want to get into? Where are you going to school? And every once in a while they would ask, do you have a portfolio of work with you? Can I see your work? And wow, not only have you gotten the conversation to turn to you so you can talk about yourself, but they've asked to see your work and they think it was their idea.
So,
That's brilliant.
Great. I love your points. And
Thank you.
it actually got me thinking when you were on your first 2 points. I just think of it as I want to have a conversation like I have with my friends. And that's not to say that this person's going to immediately become your friend, but I'm going to go back to
It'll lead to it.
a year and a half ago when we kind of met in illustration, and I think after a while of when we started sitting next to each other and collaborating on things and showing each other work and comps and everything, but even in the very first kind of instance of a conversation, which I can't even remember what our first conversation was, but I knew that Tim was a guy that I was going to like working with.
Yeah.
And that's a thing that I think you really want to look for in the people that you're talking to, and maybe like that little spark, there's something there that I think I can really get along with this person. Gosh, I'm enjoying this conversation. Because maybe that's also another point. You may run into somebody that you really wanted to show your work to, or that you really wanted to network with, but then at the same time, maybe that may not be happening. You're finding it's becoming too contrived of a conversation, or that it's becoming too forced, and maybe that's not you who's not making the conversation good, or you don't have to put that all on you. It may just be somebody that you may not work with. Because for whatever reason your personalities aren't clicking, and maybe that's a connection you don't want to make. That's just a point that came up in my head.
I'll say, because I've networked with a lot of people, and I've had the opportunity to meet some of the heroes of my industry, the theme park industry, and those usually aren't my most valuable connections, believe it or not. It'd be really nice if they were, but sometimes you just don't click with that person, or they don't take that much time with you. That's okay, because you can still have really valuable connections, if not more valuable connections, with, well, you never know. I mean, my most valuable connections are people I never would have thought would have been a tremendous asset to my network until I, met them and sat down and talked with them, and just we clicked. So,
well, we want to thank you for tuning in. We hope it just occurred to me though, if any of those people that we haven't met yet, if any of our heroes then see this and then we start talking to them when we meet, all of your tricks and our tricks are out of the bag.
Yep.
So we've been found out. And they're just going to say like, oh, these two.
I'm going to hide my
We're doomed! No, but hopefully what we've done, honestly, it's really less for us. It's just information that I wish I would have had 5 years ago. So if anybody watching is getting this information and it helps you go forward, like I said, I wish I would have had this information. That's kind of what Tim and I are doing, is trying to put it out there because we want you to be successful just as much as well. So
in summation from my end, get good at small talk, find that specific connection, and ask them questions.
And on my part, don't rush them. Let them come to you and just have a conversation. Yes. So thanks so much for tuning in, and we hope that we can help you in your future endeavors. As always, my name is Michael.
And my name's Tim.
Thank you so much for watching.
Happy networking.
Hey guys, if you have any questions, you can email us at tmi.art.productions@gmail.com.
My foot's stuck in the door.